In this podcast episode, host Shaun Ryan interviews Congressman Ro Khanna about the recent release of Jeffrey Epstein files by the Justice Department and the broader implications these revelations have on justice, politics, and society. The discussion delves into the accountability of powerful figures implicated in the Epstein scandal, the role of Congress and the Department of Justice in pursuing investigations, the influence of wealthy donors on political courage, the disturbing digital culture affecting children, and the urgent need for systemic reform to restore trust in American institutions. Ro Khanna explains that although 50% of the Epstein files were released recently, many names of alleged abusers and co-conspirators remain redacted. He stresses the urgency for Congress to subpoena all individuals named in the files for testimony. Khanna highlights that those who attended Epstein's properties, whether his island, ranch, or home, where underage girls were known to be present, should be investigated. The released emails and indictments suggest wrongdoing beyond Epstein and Maxwell, indicating a vast network that remains unaccountable. Khanna criticizes the Justice Department's reluctance to pursue charges or even interview key witnesses, emphasizing that mere speculation that investigations don't rise to a criminal level is baseless without proper inquiry. The conversation addresses the role of J.D. Vance, who once appeared as a populist warning about corruption, but now remains silent or evasive regarding Epstein-related disclosures, despite having publicly acknowledged the scandal in 2021. Khanna laments Vance's reluctance to take a firm stance, opposing protecting abusers or staying silent due to political pressures. The host and guest underline the failure of some leaders, including prominent Democrats and Republicans, to fully engage with the scandal, thereby betraying victims and undermining the integrity of their offices. Khanna refers to the concept of the Epstein class, describing an elite social stratum composed of powerful people in Silicon Valley, finance, politics, and Hollywood who are implicated or intertwined with Epstein's operations. He insists that being part of this elite network often required complicity or willful ignorance of the crimes occurring in their midst. Attendance at Epstein's parties and visitations cannot be excused as mere fundraising or social networking. The presence of minors and evidence of abuse demand accountability from everyone involved. This complicity, Khanna notes, evidences the existence of a two-tiered justice system where wealthy individuals evade consequences that ordinary citizens would face. A disturbing segment focuses on Roblox, a popular online gaming platform with millions of daily users, including many young children. Khanna and Ryan describe shocking examples of games on the platform that reenact mass shootings, such as Sandy Hook and Columbine, or simulate Epstein's Island, where players can engage in horrifying scenarios involving violence or sexual abuse. These games often feature the real names of victims, effectively memorializing tragic events by enabling children to role-play perpetrators. The hosts condemn Roblox for allowing predators easy access to children, revealing pervasive online grooming and exploitation. Despite assurances from Roblox's CEO about reforming the platform, little progress has been made. Khanna calls for comprehensive moral and legal reforms to address the broader culture of normalization of violence and sexual abuse online. Khanna shares his motivation for speaking out and pushing for accountability despite facing significant personal and political threats. He notes that few public figures are willing to confront billionaires and powerful elites due to fear of legal retaliation, loss of campaign funding, or backlash from influential political figures such as Donald Trump. Khanna acknowledges that Trump's influence discourages some Republicans from pursuing investigative efforts, but he remains committed to pushing forward, partnering with figures like Representative Thomas Massie and appealing to a bipartisan desire for justice. The podcast addresses the limited actions by the DOJ and FBI, pointing out the absence of indictments against Epstein's co-conspirators despite ample evidence. Khanna expresses frustration at the Justice Department's failure to interview or subpoena implicated individuals and accuses it of being intimidated by powerful figures who attended Epstein's properties or parties. This lack of action stands in stark contrast to ongoing calls from Congress members to hold hearings and subpoena witnesses to uncover truth under oath. Khanna stresses that Congress can act independently by initiating hearings and issuing subpoenas, but political will remains lacking. The files include names of influential tech and finance figures such as Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, and others from Silicon Valley, many of whom contribute heavily to Democratic causes. Khanna stresses that political affiliation should not shield anyone from investigation. He demands transparency about who was on Epstein's island or properties and what they witnessed. High-profile resignations, such as a partner from the law firm Paul Weiss, signal that some accountability is beginning, but much more is needed at scale. Khanna and Ryan discuss the difficulties survivors face when sensitive information is released publicly. In some cases, nude images of young girls were leaked, while paradoxically, names of alleged abusers remain blacked out. Survivors express resentment about being exposed without seeing abusers held accountable. Khanna advocates for releasing full information about perpetrators while carefully protecting survivor identities. Throughout the discussion, money's influence in politics is underscored as a major factor, allowing elites to evade justice. Donors wield enormous power by financing campaigns and super PACs, creating a chilling effect that discourages elected officials from pursuing inconvenient investigations. Khanna calls for fundamental reforms such as term limits and public financing of campaigns to reduce this leverage and renew democratic accountability. The challenging intersection of partisan loyalty, donor pressure, and fear of political fallout creates systemic inertia against transparent investigations. Khanna reflects on Epstein's mysterious reach into intelligence circles, evidenced by meetings at CIA headquarters and contacts with global leaders, including British officials and the Prime Minister of India. This network, he suggests, may constitute a national security threat, as Epstein moved fluidly between financial, political, and espionage spheres. Khanna calls for a comprehensive, nonpartisan commission to investigate Epstein's motives and connections, akin to historical government inquiries, to unmask potential compromises within U.S. institutions. The conversation turns somber as Khanna laments the erosion of moral values among the elite and the broader society. The normalization of pedophilia, pornography, violent video games, and the exploitation of children online reflects a cultural rot. Increasing levels of childhood sexual abuse, exposure to extreme pornography at younger ages, and the perpetuation of trauma contribute to recurring cycles of victimization and perpetration. Khanna stresses the need to restore respect for working-class Americans, moral leadership, and the rule of law. Khanna shares that survivors remain deeply dissatisfied and hurt by ongoing obfuscation and lack of formal justice. They want not just their stories heard, but perpetrators prosecuted and punished. Some survivors warn of powerful players in the files whose crimes deserve focused attention. Khanna and the host contemplate staging joint events with Massey and survivor advocates to amplify their voices and sustain public pressure. The discussion touches on actions taken abroad, particularly in the UK, where consequences such as Prince Andrew losing titles and Prime Minister Starmer's government facing instability over related scandals demonstrate a more aggressive accountability approach. Khanna contrasts this with the lethargic American response and implies a moral imperative for the U.S. to adopt similar resolve. These international examples provide both motivation and models for U.S. reform. Previously, those questioning Epstein's network were dismissed as conspiracy theorists, which Khanna says has shifted as evidence mounts. Yet powerful entities continue to suppress information or issue lawyerly apologies without real accountability, hoping public interest will wane. Khanna emphasizes how this culture of silence shields perpetrators and undermines democratic trust. Khanna praises non-traditional media platforms, including podcasts like Shaun Ryan's, for breaking through elite-controlled narratives and engaging working-class and skeptical audiences. Unlike mainstream Sunday shows with limited reach and repetitive discourse, independent media facilitates longer, substantive conversations that resonate with a broader, more diverse public. This media shift holds promise for increasing transparency and holding elites accountable. The podcast broadens to address systemic dysfunction in American governance. Khanna advocates for removing money from politics, instituting term limits, and restoring character and values as prerequisites for office holders. The frailty and dysfunction of current congressional leadership, including aging members disconnected from modern realities, hinder meaningful progress. Only through civic renewal and systemic reform can the issues raised by the Epstein files and broader political corruption be addressed. An extended section explores the explosion of online pornography and its impact on youth. Khanna describes how children as young as 6 or 7 are exposed to incest-themed, violent, and degrading content, fueling unhealthy sexual development and addiction. The interplay between pornography, online predators, and platforms like OnlyFans and Pornhub creates a vicious cycle that normalizes abuse and undermines healthy relationships. The hosts call for regulation and cultural change to protect minors and restore sane moral standards. Khanna underscores widespread public outrage about crime, violence, and inequality, echoing the underlying resentment of a two-tier justice system. Ordinary Americans see elites escaping punishment for crimes as heinous as pedophilia, while communities struggle with safety and economic insecurity. This disparity fuels division and instability, making reform imperative for national unity. The conversation touches on Khanna's home state of California, highlighting challenges such as homelessness, mismanagement of public funds, and unaffordable cost of living. These problems illustrate how waste, fraud, and political dysfunction permeate all levels of government and affect ordinary citizens. Khanna calls for audits, transparency, and accountability in both federal and state governments to rebuild trust and address urgent social needs. Returning to national security concerns, Khanna emphasizes that Epstein-related influence could have compromised the United States' competitive edge globally, particularly against China. He advocates for a presidentially appointed commission, staffed by respected individuals outside of politics, to investigate the full scope of Epstein's operations and connections. This inquiry would serve as a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to restore faith in governance and clarify ongoing threats to national interests. Khanna highlights 3 prongs for moving forward: Congress initiating investigations and hearings with subpoenas, securing and releasing unredacted files with responsible protections, and enacting public shaming and accountability for those implicated. He underscores that lasting change requires public pressure and democratic engagement. This includes expanding awareness, supporting survivors, and demanding integrity from leaders, regardless of party affiliation. The episode explores barriers to justice, the influence of megadonors, fear of political retribution, and partisan loyalties that undermine accountability. Calls for courage and moral leadership echo throughout, encouraging politicians not to be swayed by threats or personal ambition. Khanna and Ryan discuss the necessity of breaking the money-driven cycle that rewards silence and conformity. Final reflections focus on empowering a new generation of leaders who prioritize values and character over money and power. Khanna advocates for new norms in political participation, such as limited tenure and campaign finance reform, to refresh governance and restore democratic trust. He welcomes alliances across party lines and applauds independent media efforts that engage and inform the public on these critical issues.